Good morning. I'm Mayor Buddy Dyer, and I would like to welcome you to our May 23rd workshop of the Orlando City Council. We'll call the meeting to order, and I would first like to acknowledge that we have a group of students from the Lighthouse Baptist Academy with us today. If you guys would stand and be recognized, please. All right, occasionally we have milestones and reach very momentous days in the city of Orlando, and it's a particular note that Mayor Bill Frederick is here with us today because 20 some odd years ago he laid out a master plan for this then new City Hall that included site planning for the land adjacent across Orange Avenue, which concluded a site for a new performing arts center. And today we are here to have a presentation on how we're going to move forward with the construction of a new performing arts center for downtown. And as we have talked about many times at this council, our three-venue package of a new Amway Center, a new performing arts center, and a renovation to the Florida Citrus Bowl will do so much for transforming our downtown. They also, as we have seen with the Amway Center construction, are economic engines for our community. The new Performing Arts Center will create 3,000 construction jobs over the course of the next several years, which will be a needed shot in the arm for the construction industry here in Orlando. And with Commissioner Lynham's leadership, we have a blueprint office that is ensuring that local residents and minority businesses and women-owned businesses will fully participate and that our residents will get those good construction jobs that, yes, will be under Davis-Bacon provisions and have living wages so that our employees over there aren't living in poverty even while they're working 10 or 12 hours a day. For many reasons, it's going to move our community forward with the arts and cultural offerings. And I've mentioned a couple times I'm reading a book about falling in love with your city. We happen to have the ambassador of love with us here today, but in that book it references that arts and culture are what makes a city fall in love with itself, and certainly having a new performing arts center is going to add to the mix of the great art and culture environment that we have. I want to thank the DPAC board for persevering over the last 7 or 8 years. I've lost track, Jim, how many years it is now, but persevering over those many years through downturns in the economy and bumps along the way that I don't think anybody could ever anticipate. And then over the last month, helping to finalize a finance plan that allows us to move basically risk-free into the construction of this building with really two plans. One, to utilize projected tourist development tax, and two, if it turns out there isn't another penny of tourist development tax, then the DPAC board members have stepped up to provide letters of credit that are guaranteed by their members that will get us through stage one and allow us to pay back whatever we need to eventually if we don't have TDT during the 4 years. We're going to have a presentation this morning. Rebecca will take us through the projections on the TDT and go through all the backup plan and everything we're doing finance-wise. But before that, Byron's going to come up and walk us all the way from the beginning to where we are today, and then we will also have Trey Nobles with PCL who will take us through the bid process and give us information on what the owner's rep and Balfour Beatty have been doing the last couple of months, really. Byron, you're on.
All right. Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, Commissioners. It truly is a pleasure to present the documents for City Council approval that will allow this community to proceed with one of the most exciting and certainly anticipated projects in the city's history. So in anticipation of council action this afternoon, Mayor Dyer indeed asked us to provide a little more detail on the history of about what will be presented and, of course, the financing plan. So after I start off with a little history, Trey Nobles will then walk you through and talk to you through the specifics of the contract, the guaranteed maximum price. Rebecca will review the financing plan, and then I will close very briefly just going over the documents that you will see later today on the consent agenda. You all know this did not start today. You all are more than familiar, all too familiar with the journey this has been. This has been certainly a long and arduous process, and I think there's a song about the long and arduous journey here. And you have lived this, and much of the folks here this morning have certainly lived this. And I will call your attention to not only the June 2003 date that you see the formation of the Mayor's Downtown Strategic Transition Team. As you all know, that calendar could go beyond that, and as Mayor Dyer just mentioned, the aspirations of this community and the discussions about a world-class performing arts center certainly has its history of many, many years. We'll call your attention to April of 2004. You asked about the formation of the OPAC that were, at that time in April of 2004, so it has indeed been more than 7 years since the specific visioning and planning and strategic efforts to deliver the Performing Arts Center has been underway specific to this site, this plan, and building the predicate to get us there. This slide just wanted to remind you of some of those votes that now may seem so long ago, but July 2006 was the vote that provided the tourist development tax for the venues, community venues project, and that enabled a financing plan to come together that will give us the ability to build and proceed with design and construction of the projects, knowing that we had a mechanism to finance the project, and certainly one important mechanism for financing of the project. Certainly want to remind you of the extensive community engagement process we went through. If you remember or may not remember about the neighborhood meetings, and what I recall from those neighborhood meetings is just how well this project, the community venues as a whole and this project specifically, was received. And we had very positive community meetings, and we had very extensive community engagement throughout this process. And then certainly in November of 2006, this city council once again reaffirmed its commitment to our small, minority, and women-owned businesses, and indicated this was an integral part, an integral component of why you were moving forward with the community venues project, and indicated that it would be a project that indeed would benefit all in the community. All would have an opportunity for involvement. And then finally we got to the mid-2007 and 2007, and all the agreements with the venue partners and the interlocal agreement with Orange County were approved. In fact, I was looking at my desk this morning and called and saw that the headline for in the Orlando Sentinel on July 27th said, "Vision fulfilled, venue plan passes." And with that, we're off, and we began the work to actually design and build the projects as planned. Now I want to do a quick refresher on the project at Dr. Phillips Center for the Performing Arts, what was improved as part of that plan and what was presented at that time. And as you recall, it was a world-class facility that would certainly be a true asset, an improvement, enhancement to our community that would attract national attention, international attention, but more to the point would be a real key integral asset for our community, a part of our community pride and build on our community pride. Contained 3 theaters, the 2,800-seat amplified hall, 1,800-seat acoustical hall, the multi-purpose hall, a rehearsal, and the common areas that would include lobby and box office, very extensive banquet facility, and the education space, which was important part of the mission for the Performing Arts Center. And this is just a visual showing the spatial layout of the plan that represents that it was more expansive than just the physical structure itself, but also the vision included providing opportunities around and adjacent to the Dr. Phillips Performing Arts Center. You will note the pads for future development to the east and to the west of the actual facility, of the actual structure, and all that was created and designed and well thought out to enhance the entire experience as well. So what happened? As you all know, all too well know, the economic conditions beyond our local control certainly emerged, and they took center stage. The recession, our national recession, affected visitor travel, among other things, but that also resulted in a precipitous decline in the tourist development tax and the proceeds that we were anticipating. As you may recall, the tourist development tax was anticipated to provide $130 million towards the Performing Arts Center. This chart gives you a very good visual of exactly what we were facing and what the financial implications were. You see the first year, in 2008, we started out under the provisions of the interlocal agreement, in which a base amount was established in our arrangement with Orange County. The first year, projections working well. The actual dollar amount was just over $9.6 million received from the interlocal agreement. The decline occurred, and you see what the actual dollars of tourist development tax that was retained by the city, and what you notice is that it did not surpass the amount that would generate dollars that would come to the city for financing of the Performing Arts Center. And you see 2 straight years of that as we were moving forward. That certainly led to the mayor saying we need to revisit the project in terms of the economic reality. So you see the original plan, the 3 theaters, roughly at the time of about $383 million as a plan. And the mayor at that point charged DPAC and his board with developing a new plan, a new approach that would reflect our economic reality. And the charge was to determine if there's a way to still proceed with fulfillment of the community vision to get Performing Arts in and provide some of the experiences that we were so excited about and still move forward with that plan. And what you see was a staging plan. DPAC responded with a staging plan. The staging plan is stage 1 of the vision, realizing that the original vision maintained 2 theaters, the 2,700-seat amplified hall and the 300-seat community hall. There were some other aspects of it, like the education aspect. The acoustical hall were moved to a stage 2. And so the efforts then became focused on delivery of the stage 1 hall, and the challenges were still out there. How do you deliver and bring in a stage 1 hall within the financial resources available to us at that time, still recognizing we had some challenges to go. But I want to just briefly walk you through or highlight a few areas that shows the amount of work that has started upon receiving the initial guaranteed maximum price estimate. This was just an initial submittal from Balfour Beatty that DPAC and City of Orlando began work. We indeed recognized that we had a gap to close, and we had extensive reviews and analysis that needed to occur, and we immediately began to do that. And so by virtue of simply giving you a quick comparison on the GMP that was submitted in December of 2010 versus what you will see today, I wanted to highlight that a couple of areas, the blue highlighted areas that you see are areas that we had already begun discussions, had already identified opportunities for savings in areas such as the alternates and the value engineering component that in our discussion with the city and DPAC, there had already been agreement to make these adjustments. In the general conditions, we had already started working and talking in negotiations with Balfour Beatty to make certain adjustments to the general conditions, resulting in millions of dollars worth of savings. And then certainly there were other areas in the construction manager's fee in discussions with Balfour Beatty. And all total, I'd say that clearly over $12 million, about $12.4 million worth of savings had already been identified that we were working through shortly after December, after getting the original estimate, before any other discussions or any other reviews or any other questions raised about the project. The city and DPAC were hard at work in identifying those savings, identifying opportunities, and identifying ways to make this project work within the resources available to us. In addition to changes with the GMP that I just highlighted and design changes, Mayor Dyer convened the DPAC board members, and there was agreement to bring Hines, who was then serving as the lead owner's rep, to bring Hines in, and conducted negotiations with Hines. And Mayor Dyer explained and expressed to them the circumstance, the situation, and what would be required in order to move this project forward. And that resulted in substantial achievements in cost reductions, more than $3.2 a little over $3 million in reductions in their continued services over the life of the contract as we move forward. They reduced staffing down to 3 positions, and it was keeping the core positions. This was in keeping with the process at the time of moving towards a new lead owner's rep, and that we would keep, for continuity purposes, identifying just those key staff within the Hines organization that would continue to provide us valuable services, because they have the history, they have continuity, they've been working with this project, and we know there's value there, but we wanted to size the staffing to the appropriate level. Reduce the multiplier that they would pay. That's the overhead. The multiplier is typically for the overhead amount. Reduce the multiplier down to a 2.65 multiplier, which is well within the range that you typically see. That, for example, is very consistent with the multiplier for overhead that are in many of our city contracts as well. Added a termination clause in the agreement. The original agreement did not have a termination clause. It was not as clear and definitive as a termination clause that Mayor Dyer wanted to see in that contract, and so that was added. And then we changed the method of payment to an actual cost basis as opposed to a fee basis. Fee basis, which is a total amount, and then it's broken down into monthly payments. Instead, we went to what the actual cost would be for the actual services and reimbursables in that multiplier. And so those were some substantial changes that added up to that $3 million worth of reductions that the city and DPAC initiated before we moved to the next step, which was further review, external review, and questions about the project. That led to Mayor Dyer forming the Orlando Community Construction Corporation, or OCCC, or OC cubed, whatever name fits you best. And the Orlando Community Construction Corporation was formed in response to questions that have been asked, as well as desire to see if we can provide more focus, more direct focus to just design and construction of the Performing Arts Center, of that stage 1 of the construction project of the center. And thus it was formed. The Orlando Community Construction Corporation was formed, and as you see, the members are noted here, with Alex Martins as the chairman, Rob Mellon with Dr. Phillips Charities as vice chairman, Matt Crofton with Disney, Jim Pugh, Dr. Phillips Center, Roger Chapin as a representative of the CRA Advisory Board, and then 2 staff representatives from the agencies, myself and Ajit Lachandani with Orange County Government. And that body has taken on the responsibilities for just helping oversee and managing the owner's rep through the design and construction of stage 1. And OCCC then selected an owner's rep through a very open, competitive process. We had more than 20 firms responded, and the firm that was ultimately selected was PCL Construction. And in very short order, they began to pour through all the contracts, all the various matters that have been that we identified as needing to be reviewed, and to seek confirmation or changes as appropriate, to do a report. And at this time, I'd like to call on Trey Nobles with PCL, who will actually discuss those findings of the work they did, a very exhaustive and extensive work they did over the last few weeks.
As Trey's coming up, I want to take note that State Representative Geraldine Thompson, who is also a member of DPAC, has joined us. Welcome, Geraldine. Trey?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Byron. Good morning, Commissioners. On behalf of PCL, let me say that we are very excited to be here today and to serve on the team as the owner's representative. I think that a major component of our selection on this team is a direct result of our passion for performing arts centers. I have personally been involved in the construction of 3 performing arts centers, and many members of our core team for PCL have been involved together with me on 2 of those facilities. So we're excited about arts facilities. We understand how important they are to a vibrant community, and we're thrilled to help do whatever part we can do to make this project move forward. Our process began with digging into all of the documents, as Byron mentioned, that have been produced over the past 2.5 years worth of work. A lot of material has been produced. It is clear that a monumental effort has gone into the project to date to get things to where they are today. But we wanted to work together in a collaborative environment with all of the team members, including DPAC and the OCCC and the city, also with the designers, the construction manager, and with Hines, to come to a collaborative agreement of all of the efforts that have been put forth to date. We were seeking concurrence by every member of that team for a GMP on the 23rd of May. Here we are, 23rd of May, and pretty happy to report to you what we've got to share in this presentation. One of the key elements of that was crafting language that all parties agreed to that allowed Balfour Beatty to issue conditional subcontracts to their subcontracting firms and avoid further escalations of price from those subcontracts. So that process is underway, and that's a real win for the entire team. But overall, the process has been ongoing. It has been iterative. It's a back-and-forth exchange of information, multiple meetings. A vast amount of material has been covered, analyzed, to maintain design integrity, to optimize the risks for all parties, to maximize the value, and identify any inefficiencies. And the results of that are what we're going to highlight today. Our focus throughout this process has been to look at these key components of the work that had been done. Starting with the contracts, we wanted to understand whether the terms were fair and reasonable for the existing market conditions. We believe they are. We analyzed the fees and the contingencies, and we looked at the balance of risk, understanding whether the party who is best able to manage those risks is doing so. We looked at the bid process, analyzed that, which I'm going to go into a little bit more detail in a moment about. We looked at the blueprint and the Davis-Bacon wage rate issues, and we'll give you our summary on that. We studied the value engineering process and the deferrals, and I'll share with you what we've found through that process. We also looked at two sets of documents that are out there, the bid set and the permit set, and got everybody to have a clear understanding of what each set of documents represented. We also looked at the schedule and the site logistics plan of the CM, and I can tell you that the schedule is a 34-month schedule to substantial completion with a 3-month to final completion, which we believe is aggressive but achievable, and Balfour Beatty will be able to manage that effectively. And lastly, we looked at the program budget, which when I'm concluding here, I'll turn it over to Rebecca and have her give you the details of the budget. So I told you I'd give you a better breakdown of the bid package analysis and the conclusions arrived at through that analysis. This is a summary of that iterative process I mentioned before. What would happen is we had a team of 5 project managers involved in going through each bid package. There were 84 total bid packages. Over 380 bids were received, averaging to 4.5 bids per package. Our team went through each of those bid packages, had questions for the CM or for its subcontractors. That process was back and forth, ultimately leading us to agree that the contractor had selected the right subcontractor in 96% of all of those bid packages by dollar value. So out of 84 bid packages, 77 totaling 111, almost 112 million, we agree with. We also agree collectively that we should consider rebidding 5 of those packages, totaling $3 million or just at 3%. And we are looking at alternate bidders on 2 of those packages in an effort to perhaps reduce those scopes in cost slightly. Once again, we are proceeding with the conditional issuance of subcontracts based upon those agreed upon subcontracts. Next was the analysis of the blueprint and the Davis-Bacon component. And the process the CM went through was to debundle the packages to right-size them for the community. And it's apparent that that process was effective through our analysis. We've determined that not only are the blueprint percentage goals achieved and exceeded, but also the project's stated goals of 30% have been exceeded by the efforts of the CM. So that was a successful effort on their part, certainly. The blueprint refers you to City Policy 161.3. We studied that policy and determined that it requires compliance with the Davis-Bacon wage rates for the City of Orlando, and we feel that the CM's GMP currently is compliant with the blueprint and with the city's procedure for living wage, as Mayor Dyer spoke about in his introduction. The next process was to analyze the value engineering. We had a large VE workshop session that involved well over 30 people from throughout the teams I mentioned. We started with a morning session where we analyzed all the 50% CD, VE, and deferrals. That's a lot of acronyms, but all of the value engineering, all the deferral items that had been considered at the 50% design development stage were gone through in detail as a group. We then looked at all the post-bid value engineering and deferral items, and then we talked about a host of new ideas and concepts. Out of that list, we were ultimately able to analyze which ones we thought were worth further analysis. Then in the afternoon, we had a breakout session for each of those components you see there: HVAC and plumbing, electrical lighting, structural, interiors, and envelope. And a smaller group of 5 to 7 people met in the afternoon and delved into each one of those items that affected that scope of work to try to decide which ones might be worthy of reconsideration. Ultimately, a list was developed that could be used to offset post-GMP cost increases on an as-needed basis, basically a menu that's available to offset cost increases in the event they're necessary. Those items are not currently reflected in the GMP we're about to report to you. So, the GMP. Balfour Beatty's total GMP price as it stands today is $134,406,829. Now that includes their pre-construction services component. You see broken out there in the second line, which is just over $1.9 million. That includes, incidentally, their original $1.5 million, along with the extension of the pre-construction services. So that's the total pre-construction services amount. Then we had the projected owner direct purchase sales tax savings, which we feel this is a very achievable sum of our budget for tax savings. Basically, it represents $25 million worth of material, easily achievable on this project. So the net GMP that we're recommending today is $130,818,492. With that, Rebecca Sutton will go through the rest of the budget with you. Rebecca?
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners, and those in the audience. This is a very wonderful day. I'm so glad that we've gotten to this point, and I think that we have a very solid and responsible and prudent financial plan to move forward with this project. First, let's look at the uses of funds. I think one thing that we sometimes think is that the GMP is the entire budget, and that's not the case. We, in fact, have other things which have to be also paid for, including our contingency of $13 million. We have all believed that it was important to maintain a larger contingency than typically that you maintain in projects like this, because we need to have an additional backstop for any kind of issues that we encounter, and that we do not have to enlarge the budget for those particular things. So this is double the standard contingency that we would see in a project like this at this particular point. There were other project costs as well, including some land that we needed to purchase, the architectural and engineering services from both HKS and other providers of those engineering and architectural services. The pre-construction services, which you saw on the last slide, being deducted out of the contract that you're going to approve today. Testing and inspections that we expect to have to undertake as well. and then permits and furniture, fixtures, and equipment. And that comes to a total of $201,558,490. One thing that I think that we need to cover right at this particular point is, importantly, the status of our tourist development tax. The tourist development tax, as you saw in the previous slide, declined in fiscal 2009. We got $9.6 million in 2008 for fiscal 2008, paid in January of 2009. But in 2009 and 10, we received none, as was covered before. However, this year we're seeing a major rebound, and we'll expect to get a little over $1 million given our current projections. At this particular point, the tourist development tax is over 16% higher than last year. These projections assume only 13.5%. So we've pulled back from what we're actually seeing this year to a much lower, or not much lower, but a somewhat lower number, taking into consideration that we may not see quite that level of increase in the last few months of the fiscal year. And then moving forward, we have projected an 8% increase, 5% increase, and then a 4% increase in 2012, 13, and 14, respectively. This projection is pretty much in the middle of the various projections that I've seen for this particular revenue stream. I think we're comfortable that we are giving it the credit that it's due, but not being too optimistic about how much we're going to get during this time, trying to sort of hit the sweet spot in that projection. And so we have adopted these particular parameters for that. So, assuming that we're going to get that $43 million, we would include the $129 million of bonds that we issued. These bonds were voted on and issued by, or voted on by the City Council and issued by the City in September of 2009 and spring of 2010 to total $129 million. As you saw in Byron's slide, that first year we did get $9.6 million, that's included, and then $43 million, as we've indicated in our projection slide, moving forward with the tourist development tax through what we believe to be the construction and closeout and to final billing. The state funding that we have had in the project for some time, and we have are continuing to have that confirmed. And then finally, city's infrastructure. When we first put together the financing plan, we had a separate budget, separate and apart from the building, for the infrastructure that surrounded the building. This would be street improvements, relocations of utilities, various streetscape and ground development of grounds and other kinds of things around that particular building. And that was in a different budget and financed separately from the guaranteed maximum price contract and the budget. This has been budgeted for some time, and so we have provided that, and we have also confirmed that the actual costs of the construction, along with the contingency that's appropriate for that cost of construction, attributable to those infrastructure items, is within this $5 million number, and approaches it. I believe it's in the I think $4.8 or $9 million is what that is today. So that then funds our $201,600,000 in round numbers. And I think that we believe that based on projections and based on trying to get our projections pretty much in the range and in the sweet spot of the predictions that we have for that tourist development tax, that there'll be a sufficient TDT available for the construction of Stage 1. And with these updated projections, we don't anticipate needing any bridge funding. I think there's been a lot of discussions about bridge loans and that sort of thing. We do not believe that there's going to be a need for any of those kinds of things, and that the TDT at our projection levels will support the construction of Stage 1. With that said, however, it's important to know that if we should experience a 9/11 type disturbance or an economic downturn such as we saw in the 2008-2009 timeframe, that we have a backup plan. A plan, one, that does not rely on a single new penny of additional city funding, and secondly, uses funding sources that can only be used on the community venues projects, cannot be used for things like police, fire, or roads. So here are the key details of our contingency plan that you'll see in the right-hand column. In the interlocal agreement, the city has a previously approved contractual obligation to hold a $25 million reserve to support the bonding of contract TDT revenues under the interlocal agreement. This reserve has been established and is held in the community venues funds. And if the TDT doesn't materialize as we've anticipated, there's no longer a need for that reserve because we have no revenues upon which we can bond. So essentially we can use that revenue, that reserve as a loan against the TDT. Or alternatively, if we have some TDT but not enough to fund the project, we could go ahead and issue bonds based on that revenue stream and use the TDT reserve or the interlocal reserve as it was intended to be used. Additionally, the TDT or the interlocal reserve is projected to generate over $2 million. We've included $2 million in the budget, but it should probably produce something more than that. We wanted once again to be conservative with that number. And finally, the DPAC board, led by Jim Pugh, Chuck Steinmetz, and Mayor Bill Frederick, have stepped up and provided letters of credit amounting to $16 million to allow us to move forward. This is in concert with the DPAC agreement with the city. There was a provision for construction shortfalls to be secured with letters of credit, and they have used that particular portion of their agreement to step forward with letters of credit to allow us to move forward with the project. And with that, I'm going to go through operations. I think this is another aspect that has been of some question and some discussion over the last few months. DPAC has developed a base operations plan, and they were nice enough to allow me and some of my staff to review and participate in the creation of that operations plan. This operations plan conforms with industry standards, and it employs conservative assumptions. Here's some examples of those conservative assumptions. Income from ancillary development has been delayed, and the city did a real estate study to determine at what point could we expect the absorption in the downtown area to allow for that ancillary development to move forward. And they budgeted and did their projections in accordance with the dates in that study. Endowment income in their operations plan is based on the current balance of the endowment increasing to their required $25 million between now and mid-2019 in accordance with their agreement. There was a time frame that was placed in the agreement that the City Council adopted and what was attached to the interlocal and adopted by both the City Council as well as the Board of County Commissioners that indicated that there was a 5-year time frame after opening in which this endowment would be accumulated. They have made assumptions about the income off of that endowment in accordance to their projections of accumulating that particular reserve in that particular time frame. Some of the available approaches to doing bookings in the building have taken very, very conservative positions. There are many options, some upside, if you will, that's available to them depending on how they make the arrangements for some of the bookings in that building. And then expenditures have also been estimated conservatively to give some margin for error, if you will, once the building opens. This base operations plan has been extensively vetted with other peer performing arts groups, And then local residents and arts groups as well, to make sure that it seems to conform with their knowledge of what's going to go on in the building. And then finally, in the last couple of months, some major operations experts in the local market, Walt Disney World, Orlando Magic, Universal Orlando, and the City of Orlando, have all evaluated this base operations plan and have made comments on it. It has been modified, and those comments have been taken seriously. So we feel that that vetting process has resulted in a very, very solid plan. Now, this balanced budget that we find in this operations plan requires revenues to be donated annually of $2 million. And that is only 2.2% of the philanthropy that this group has already raised. It's not a huge amount given the performance that they have shown to all of us, and how well they have done in the community in getting the arts supported. But I think that an important aspect is that their privately supported programming in the center will flex to the level of the gifts they receive. So in the event that, for instance, in a particular year they don't receive as many gifts as they had anticipated, then for the following year they'll reduce the amount of programming that they will undertake to match that level of revenue that they have collected in their donations. And so with that, I will turn it back over to Byron to go over the action items that you will have today in the City Council meeting.
Thank you, Rebecca. And I will bring it to a close. Just wanted to quickly go over the items that are on your agenda for this afternoon, the City Council item. There are 5 items that will be seeking council action, and I wanted to just briefly cover each of those in addition to the briefings that we've already done with you on them. G7, I'm going in reverse order, Letterman style, is the amended and restated construction contract with Balfour Beatty. And essentially this is the GMP, but more than the guaranteed maximum price, it is also the construction contract as well. So we often refer to the GMP, but it's actually the construction agreement as a whole. And as you'll see or have seen, there was much discussion. You got the details on what's included in the guaranteed maximum price, what those responsibilities that Balfour will have, and wanted to certainly highlight the participation that Trey mentioned, and that the anticipated MWBE participation at over 39%, which is a phenomenal amount of recognition of our community goal. The next item, G6, is the Master Owners Representative Services Agreement, 3-party agreement with City, DPAC, and OCCC. And essentially it is DPAC assigning the responsibilities that it has in its agreement between DPAC and the city for oversight of the construction, design and construction of the Performing Arts Center. Those responsibilities are being assigned to OCCC. DPAC still has responsibility on the fundraising component of it. And obviously and clearly there'll be close coordination, continued close coordination between OCCC and DPAC. But it allows DPAC to focus on the critical areas of preparing for opening and the operations, and of course continued philanthropic efforts and fundraising. G5 is the amendment to the agreement for production architectural services. This is the agreement with HKS, again the contract held by DPAC. Once again, you saw an overview of the numbers associated with that contract, essentially increasing from a little over $29.9 million to $32.2 million. The bulk of that increase is to now prepare for continuing those services through construction. So about $1.2 million of that increase is we're at the stage they're prepared to move forward. We're prepared to move forward, and so this contract reflects their continued role through construction, as well as there's some services they've been provided over the past several months that they now will be compensated for those services. And once again, they also have fully embraced the blueprint and this council's continued commitment to small and MWB participation, with 30% participation on the design contract. G4 is the ranking of firms to provide threshold inspection services. Actually, this selection process was completed some time ago, but we've been holding on bringing the rankings forward until we were at a point of a go on the project. And the procurement committee reviewed all the proposals. They ranked them in the following order, with Universal Engineering Sciences as 1, Dorsey and Associates at 2, and PSI USA 3, and Ardeman Associates at 4. Similar to our own process, this is a ranking. You now, with approval of the ranking, the negotiations will occur. We will negotiate on the specific terms of those contracts, negotiate on the specific amount of MWB participation. All have committed to our city goal of 24%, but we get to the specifics of it during the negotiations. Then we bring that contract back to council for approval, as we do with all of our other contracts. And G3 is the ranking of firms for construction materials testing. Likewise, we've been holding on these contracts for quite some time until we got to a point of a decision on the project. Now we're prepared to bring the construction materials testing contract forward. The procurement committee ranked Dorsey and Associates at 1, Ardeman Associates at 2, PSI USA at 3. These services, pending the ranking, will now go into negotiations, and likewise we'll do contract negotiations, finalize contract amount, MWB participation, and bring that contract back for final approval. And so those are all the particulars and the technicalities and the numbers, but wanted to certainly leave you with the vision and the more emotional and the passion of why such a project, and take you back to those discussions in 2007 and beyond, even earlier than that, in terms of what it could mean to this community, what it means to our community pride, and what it would mean to have a world-class facility, a facility in which memories will be created and longing and lasting impression, and what we have an opportunity to do as a community. And so just a couple of images, hopefully powerful images, just to remind you about the potential, the possibilities of a world-class performing arts center in our community in Orlando. And those who will have the opportunity to visit this facility and the lasting impression it may make. And with that, Mayor, we conclude our presentation.
Thank you, Byron, Rebecca, and Trey. Questions, comments? Commissioner Lynham.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Byron, for the presentation. Just a few observations first, and I may have to come back with a few more questions, because I think the main concern the community is going to have will be about financial concerns. But I do want to acknowledge, I know former Mayor Bill Frederick is here, but I served under Mayor Glenda Hood, and my 2 years of running for this office, that's all I heard, and the 4 years I served with her, so I had 6 years of talking about the Performing Arts Center. And it was under her, the CNL to the north and south were constructed and made way for these spaces. So I'd like to always acknowledge, if I can, to make sure there's some historical accuracy in our moving forward, that she had that ring for a long time and was very, very busy in really pursuing the concept of a performing arts center. And I do still appreciate her efforts. Just a couple of questions. I was going to ask, I think on the financial side first, to maybe Rebecca, to Byron, and then the contracts. When I see the Performing Arts Center, I think of world-class like I do with high-speed rail or light rail or Sunrail. But more importantly, during this economy, I see jobs. And every vote I make is about jobs and job opportunities and the inclusion of a community that is normally not included, and that is minority and women-owned businesses, and particularly in my district, African Americans. So that is almost more important to me than anything, but I can't do that if I don't have a project. So I just want everyone to be abundantly clear. The blueprint is absolutely crucial to this community understanding and buying into our moving forward. With this economy, everybody is frightened about the money we spend for what some may perceive as not relevant to what is happening. But the relevancy to me is jobs, period. So thank you a lot for helping us understand that. But my question was, with the guaranteed maximum payment, the GMP, and the reduction in fees from whether it's value engineering or there's contract managers, and all of those reductions that PCL has reviewed, was there a change in the cost of this construction? I didn't see any significant changes in the total cost.
Well, there was a change
Was there?
from what the initial construction bids were, which was, I think, 143, down to the 130 number. It was a 143 to 130, so about 13. And there's a piece of it. There are some items that are being deferred, and the DPAC board is going to need to raise some money to make sure that, for instance, the donor room goes back onto the building, and that's an important component of it. Brian, you want to handle?
Yeah.
think
I noticed
got
you
that
said
right.
96% of them were okay going through Balfour Beatty, but even with Balfour Beatty, there was a significant reduction in their fees. So, and I don't know whether there was a rippling effect, and I understand that, and I know we're going to defer, I know we're going to reconsider some, but I just want to make sure that the community knows and understands there was an original cost for the construction of the Performing Arts Center. There were bids, and a lot of work has been done already. I presume that pre-construction with Balfour Beatty at 1.9 million plus, and probably paying their subs and whatnot. Was there, I know the contracts have been reduced. I saw that, I read that, and I talked with you last night about some of it. But was there any total reduction in the GMP?
There's a slide that's right after, it's the first slide after Stage 1 Performing Arts Center delivery, and Byron had highlighted the ad alternates, the VE, and then the general
Right.
conditions reductions. And
Right. And that's what I was just asking
and
him.
the construction
It dealt with the
manager's
alliances,
fee.
it dealt
Yeah.
with the general, with the contractors, construction managers' fees, it dealt with value engineering, it dealt
Sure.
with four or five
Four di-
issues.
right, four different
And I
components.
saw those, but what I'm asking is, I saw the fees change.
Yeah.
And all
the-
I'm asking is one
Sure.
simple question.
Sure, I was going to ask
Did
that.
it change
general
the
conditions-
overall cost? Because when we started a few years ago, there was one cost based on that market.
Correct.
And things have changed, but a lot of money has already been spent. Did it change anything, or was it because a lot of money had already been spent that it didn't change a whole bunch?
Definitely there were changes in the costs. Now, the construction, the actual hard
Yeah.
bids.
I saw
Trey
$12 million
Went
too.
through that and determined they validated the contract, the bid pricing. They said there were good pricing on the vast majority of those, and so those are good numbers. Now, where there were other changes, and that may be a little bit about what we talked about most recently in the briefing, was in general conditions. So, for example, that's $3 million in changes of general conditions. That was, those were changes that were negotiated from the original submittal by Balfour in terms of just different costs. Some of that may be due to tightening the schedule, since some of these are just costs that continue with the number of months you're out there. Here's your fixed cost. By tightening, looking at the schedule, tightening the schedule, you can identify opportunities of savings. There were certain discussions about the multiplier rate, discussions about what costs were included, the appropriate staffing. That's another significant area in which you can address and find savings in the general conditions cost as well, in terms of the staffing patterns, as well. That was reviewed. What's included in that? That was another area. So, for example, in the original submittal, there were some costs for the project executive that have been negotiated out of the contract, and that resulted in savings. So those are true, definite savings. The Hines contract was another area that I hit. Those were definitive savings in terms of renegotiations of the number of staffing level, multiplier rates as well in that contract. So those are two areas where those are hard dollar savings to the total overall cost of the project. The GMP, the construction side, just to hit both, you saw the decrease from 140 for stage one, 144 million. A number of those, yes, to answer your question, a number of those are value engineer or deferrals. The vast majority of deferrals, so that to the extent that monies become available through fundraising efforts, and it becomes available at the right sequence with the timing, because there's a critical path for construction, those items will be added back. Some items, there were some dollars that are value engineered, which means they are out of the project, not included. So that's how you get to that combination of dollars.
Okay, because I was looking at the multiplier, went from 2.8% down to what, 0.25 or something? It was a
I
really
think that was
significant.
the split of the split of
Just split, okay.
kind of where the dollars
I'm
was
just
spent.
trying to make sure what we understand, or think we understand, that our community that we serve, I know my community, and maybe everybody else has got it, I have to make certain that when I go to church or when I go to something, I'm able to explain it, and for the most part, if they ever watch this program or are watching, I do have about 5 people in my district are watching right now. So I want to say hi, y'all, and I'm trying to make it clear to you what is happening here. Because we do go through those slides kind of quickly. And the other thing is, I don't know about anybody else, but half of them I couldn't see at some point. They just went fuzzed on me. Could have been like a sight. But the other piece is, in terms of the financing, let me back up. Balfour Beatty was 1.946,411 pre-construction costs. Those are things they've already done. Have they already spent that money?
Yes.
Because they've been
It's
working
everything.
for, what, 3 years, 2 years? It's been on 2 years or something. I know a long time.
Correct. The vast majority from the original 1.5, plus there's been services that have been provided from January to this point, revisiting
And getting
that we
all those contracts out.
correct, that we have
dealing
not
with
yet
those.
paid them. So there, a lot of folks are waiting to get to this date to see, to architectural design service in Balfour. So those are services, they are for services that have been rendered to date.
Okay, did nobody pay them anything yet?
Yes, they've gotten some early payment just
Okay,
over the
because it
last
said
few months.
included or whatever, okay.
Right, the last few months, we have been waiting, going through this process and waiting to get to a final decision point so we know what the final contract would be.
Okay. Well, explain to me then, if everybody else understands. There were two architects, our local people, which in the beginning we said we were going to have the national group come in to had a lot of experience with performing arts centers, and they were going to be the pre-design and whatnot. But I keep hearing their noises out there. What's happening to those people? Because our local contractor is HKA,
HKS.
HKS.
Right.
And so what's happening to those people out of California, wherever they're from? Why are they still making noise?
The original plan was to have the production architect, which is the local HKS group, and then to have the design architect, concept, that's Barton Myers. And Barton Myers was involved, selected probably 2005, I think around roughly 2005, and certainly laid the groundwork for the initial visioning, worked very closely with the DPAC and the community on the concept, on the design, on the bringing special unique features to this performing arts center that would certainly render it in a position that it would have a meaningful and long-lasting effect. Barton Myers has been involved, part of the services, we've been providing certain services. We are now at the production stage, and one of those decision points that has been identified is to have discussions with respect to the continued role, what that role may be going forward with Barton Myers as we move to the construction.
Do we owe them any
side.
money?
Yes, they are owed some money from, likewise,
So do
all
you
of our
think if we pay
design
them off, that'll
services.
quiet them down?
Those discussions are
Okay.
ongoing with
Okay.
respect to the
I know they're a
next phase
good
of that.
group, you know, so I know some of their work, but I was just concerned and confusing when I read something and they're still interjecting a lot of noise, and then you come up with HKS.
Sure.
So I was concerned. Let me ask you this. Regarding the $15 million we got from the state, that was under Jeb Bush. That's 2 governors ago. How much interest has that money brought to us? Where is that money?
Commissioner, those funds don't come to us until we're ready to pay an invoice.
So it's somewhere
anything
earning interest for somebody else?
for the state at this
Okay.
particular point.
Okay. Well, since you're there, let me ask you about the $5 million I heard you say, but I didn't hear the word, that is included in the budget for infrastructure that the city is going to pay for. Was that already voted on somewhere in some budget? Which
It's
one was that?
always been in the financing plan, contained in the interlocal agreement that was adopted by City Council. If you look in the sources section of the financing plan, the first item, the first thing, is the construction of the building itself. Then we have 2 other lines that are associated with land acquisition and site improvement, demolition, site preparation, and then another line that's associated with infrastructure. And these particular items were envisioned at the beginning to be paid for from that infrastructure line. The financing source for the infrastructure for all 3 projects was the redevelopment proceeds from our current Centroplex site. And those funds have been held and are in our bank accounts right now. So when we began to look very closely at the guaranteed maximum price contract, we saw that there were some things, I guess I saw, that there were some things in that contract that we had intended to fund from another line item in the project. And so we identified what those were. We applied the 10% contingency, and we're pulling those amounts, that $5 million, and we'll use that to make payments on the guaranteed maximum price contract when we are doing the construction of those infrastructure elements. Whenever those come through on a progress payment, we will take part of the, if a progress payment is split, we'll split it. But we're essentially sourcing those elements in the GMP that are rightly funded from the infrastructure line item from that source, as opposed to the construction fund.
Well, the most calls I've received.
Just one more thing, excuse me, Commissioner. This is the same thing we did with the Amway Center. We had a number of infrastructure items, street improvements, we relocated utilities, we had streetscape, we had all of those various things. That was accounted for in a different line item than the building amount that we had in that particular project. The $385 million building amount in the Amway Center did not include the infrastructure. That was an additional $100 million in that particular project, taking it to $485.
Well, thank you. I had 3 major calls from constituents and people from the community. The first one, of course, was always about getting jobs, and I've already expressed my sentiments about that. This is about jobs for me and for this economy, and I'm very, very thankful that we're moving forward on that. But the second one, there's a third one I've got to remember, was regarding reserves. And when I had a post-it meeting with Mayor Dyer, I understand it. But in the beginning, when we were talking about reserves, the concept was whether we were going into cities' reserves. And a few years ago, we had like over $100 million in reserves. And of course, we don't anymore. But the reserves we were talking about was $25 million to secure TDT. 2 years ago, I believe, whenever it was, we entered into these contracts, and I saw the timeline. So I need to make certain to my constituents and people who are asking me that these reserves were the reserves that we had already voted on, had pulled them out over 2 years ago, or somewhere along that line, whatever the timeline was, to secure the bonding, the loan against the TDT, that $43 million, I presume, or to that effect, or some portion of it. And we're not going into additional reserves.
No, ma'am. These reserves were accumulated on a couple of different occasions by actions of this city council. They were accumulated. They do not reduce. This has nothing to do with any reserves in our general fund. Nothing whatsoever to do with that. This is all separate. It's contained within the community venues portion of our financials.
Well, I just think it just...
And
can't say
Commissioner,
enough.
to your point, one of the news organizations that I won't identify, when they were detailing the finance plan, incorrectly said if the TDT doesn't materialize, the city would use some of their reserves, and didn't qualify as to what they were talking about. So some of your constituents, if they watched a certain channel, could have been misinformed.
Well, I don't know whether they're watching that channel, since I don't, but, and so I don't know where they got it from. I'm just saying, I just want to be clear, because if you remember, I asked you to make certain that what we were talking about today, and it's very easy to have so many and so much discussion to get some of this lost and to be mistaken, and some people don't like it from the beginning, from the reserves. But the other part and the issue is having these small businesses and having a new owner's rep, that these businesses, and we've had some challenges, but overall very successful blueprint and hiring with the event center, but everybody wants to get paid. And that's very, very important. When we're dealing with small businesses, you can't afford to put them out of their business. You can't afford to mistreat these people. If there are problems, we have professionals to help. And this is one time I like to see us really take the high road in handling this construction and making everyone in this community feel a part of it. I plan to do that through my office and through what I know, and I'm going to always ask questions for the least person I represent as much as possible, and as unless there's a total lack of intellectual integrity on their part, total lack of whatever it is that I can't explain it, that we get this job done and get it done right for their sakes. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, we'll move on to Commissioner Stewart, then Commissioner Sheehan, then Commissioner Diamond. Commissioner Stewart.
Thank you, Mayor, and let me also thank you to the DPAC group. Mayor Bill, always good to see you, and always good to recognize you as a member of my district. Thank you very much. There's a lot of comments that we have all made. I have been candid in the fact that when you try to build all three and try to make the process go on all three, what happens is that there are different parts of our community, those who are coming in and those who are already here. It becomes an instrumental to the economic development side. In some occasions, it is not quite so easily seen. Other cases, it is seen clearly. And so the mayor has mentioned on several occasions about Burnham and the growth of the medical city, which I'm convinced would not happen if it weren't for the commitment that we made several years ago. And Mayor, I appreciate your leadership in that. I do have some questions on the financial side. Rebecca, if you don't mind, I apologize. We didn't get a chance for you and I to talk briefly prior to the meeting, so I've just got a couple of questions that I'd like to kind of address with you, just mainly a little bit for my education and for those who are the 4 or 5 people that are listening.
4 or 5 from your district, too.
Yeah, that's right. We're going to get all the way up to 50 or 60 people. On my page 13, which we talked about the TDT projections, you mentioned a couple of things I think are probably instrumental in terms of our direction. You mentioned that they are looking at a projection roughly about 16%. We use roughly 13.5% as that projection to make sure we've got a little bit of contingency or a little bit of breathing room. The figures that you have represented here represent the 13.5%.
Yes, the 1.238997 represents a 13.5% growth this fiscal year.
Okay.
The next year represents an 8% growth.
Say again?
An 8% growth. The following year represents a 5% growth, and the final year in that slide represents a 4% growth.
Now, And 13, of course, is, you're telling me that the projections are actually higher, and we're using 13.5 to assume that something may occur towards the end of the year that we can't anticipate.
The 13.5% is a projection that's being used by the county for this year.
Okay.
However, our performance to date for the 6 months, the first 6 months of this fiscal year, has been 16, over 16. So, I think that just in an abundance of caution, we all try to kind of cut what we're seeing back a little bit, and so that's really what the 13.5% is.
I guess the question I'm really looking at is that we're using numbers that almost are effectively more conservative than what's been projected by the county, or using their numbers per se. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. The fear I have in this process isn't that the TDT will come through or that it won't come through. What I don't quite understand is the plan between if it only comes through partially. And I don't know that we've addressed that a little bit. So my assumption is right now that if it came through at, say, 28 million versus 43 million, is the idea that we would use the balance of that out of reserve to accomplish that 43 million, or that's what I'm trying to figure out. To get to the 43 million, that's the key.
Correct. I think that probably what would happen is that in late 2012, early 2013, we would be coming to you for a decision. The $25 million bond, interlocal bond reserve, so that I can distinguish that as Commissioner Lynan very rightly distinguished for me, is not part of the general fund, not part of any other reserve. It's specifically for the bonding. Then we would make a decision whether to appropriate all or a portion of that $25 million for spending. Currently, it is not appropriated for spending. It's simply held. So we would make a decision at that point to appropriate it for spending, all or a part of it, or we would use it to issue bonds to produce some of the TDT. I think that's going to depend on what level of TDT that we have at that particular point in time. And if it appears that we have sufficient TDT to move, or contract TDT revenues to move forward with a bond issue under the interlocal, then we might consider to do that. I think that's a decision that this council will make when we get to that point, when we know the level of tourist development tax that we have, and then kind of what our future plans are beyond this first stage. I think all of those things will come into play, and I would expect that that would come, at least into 2012, where we saw what we got from this year, what we got from next year, and then we could make a decision at that particular point how to move forward during the 2013 year.
Yeah, that's the concern. I think my brain is kind of is that there's a worst case scenario, there's the best case scenario, and what usually happens is in between. And so I'm thinking what's going to probably usually happen in between is we're probably not going to get the 43 million. That's what typically be the case, but we would get a significant portion of that. So what would be the action that would take place? I'll also look at it from a different perspective, too, is that the worst case scenario with this is that we get stage one completed. The best case scenario is sometime about 2013, everything is rebounded in a way that we continue the construction to complete stage two in this same process. That would be what I would want to happen. But effectively, with what we're currently doing, we really have kind of set the stage to kind of, from what I understand, kind of anticipate all of those scenarios.
Absolutely.
Which is, I think, what the role of this council actually is to set what's the worst case, how do we respond, and then let's go ahead and plan for the best case, or plan for the worst case and hope for the best case scenario. The other question I want to ask you, and I guess maybe I'm just missing some of this a little bit in terms of the response, is that I know that part of the DPAC philanthropy efforts includes some of the into hard costs in terms of construction, and some into reserve for operating costs as well. And when I look at the slide that was right after this one, I'm trying to figure out where is that, where is their philanthropy in terms of the hard costs here?
That's a very good question, Commissioner. When we went into contract with DPAC, we had certain costs which would be paid from the private side, and certain costs which were eligible to be paid from public dollars. The philanthropy that has been received to date and is available has been used for the design architect, for Hines, for land acquisition, notably the United Methodist Church site and the McGuire property directly across the street from it, and then the operations of Dr. Phillips Center from the outset of this project to now. And that particular amount, I believe my last number was $62 million. My staff's in the room. They can correct me if I didn't get that quite right. But $62 million has been spent to date on those things. We do not show that here because those particular items are not eligible to be funded from public dollars. They are only to be funded from private dollars. And so we do get the details of those expenditures reported to us. We do capitalize those expenditures and make that part of our asset, but we do not pay for those expenditures. They're paid from those private funds.
So in my layman's terms, what we're only really dealing with is that difference of the total project cost, what's already been paid for, to what we think the total project cost of stage one is.
Correct.
The
I think it's
funding.
important to note that the portion of the project costs that have been paid for by DPAC are not only for stage one. The design was for stage two as well. A lot of the preparation was for both stages. So it's not a clean, we couldn't add them all together and call them stage one.
If in the course of the next couple of weeks, I'd love to get a chance to kind of see the recap of all of that, kind of where we are in result of what we make the decisions on today. Because I think we need to keep sending the signal to the community that this is not an Orlando project, this is a community project. And we have dollars and cents that have helped identify that as a community project, and we ought to, I would say we ought to rejoice in that. We shouldn't have to defend it. We ought to take the initiative and rejoice in that function. And the last question is, though, and I think back to the DPAC, if I understand from the next slide that you gave us, that your balanced budget includes a donated revenues of $2 million. This is interest on some of the DPAC money that DPAC is putting back into the process?
No, sir. This would be gifts specifically for operations, perhaps to sponsor certain programming that they have in the building. I did not note this in my presentation, but I think it's important to note that this particular amount is well below many of their peer art centers in terms of what they raise annually for operations.
Well, as always, I think I've shared also with the committee that the greatest concern I have is if we think this is difficult for us to build a building, it is going to be a significant challenge to continue that building operation. And candidly speaking, with the people that we've got involved, I have a great deal of confidence that they will accomplish that task. And so they have my utmost confidence. So thank you very much. That's all the questions I have. Thank you very much.
Thank
Mayor.
you, Commissioner. Commissioner Sheehan.
Thank you, Mayor. And Rebecca, I want to thank you very much. I know Rebecca, the financial staff, Byron, the economic development staff, everything from our transportation staff, everybody's had to work on this in one way or another, and we'll do so working forward. And I want to just thank the city staff as well that's been working so hard on this. In addition to Mayor Bill, this must be an amazing day for you to have seen this come forward. So, and Jim Pugh to make it happen for us, Kathy Ramsberger, all the private donors, everybody who's been there at the board. I know that you've taken a lot of hits over the past few months, but it's never easy to do something that's hard to do. And when you take on something that no one else has ever, they've attempted but they haven't succeeded at, it's because it wasn't easy. And you know what? I'm proud of y'all, and I'm proud to be able to support you here today. And I just want to say thank you because I know you've taken a lot of knocks that you didn't maybe sometimes deserve. I just want to say thank you. And I'm going to tell the story one more time. When I was in 4th grade, I watched Peter and the Wolf in the Preservation Hall in Cleveland, Ohio. It was the first classical music I had ever heard in my life. And it changed my life because it made me realize that as a kid, my dad struggled a lot and we kind of had hard times. We didn't have a whole lot of money. And that was something that just amazed me. I still have that ticket, okay? Now I've worked I've had to work construction to work my way through school. I had a hard time coming up, but I always held on to that ticket because it changed my life. And you all are going to be able to change children's lives because they're going to sit in this hall and they're going to hear something that they've never heard before. They're going to experience performances that they would never get the chance to experience, and that's because of everyone in this room today. And I want to say thank you for that, because it changed my life. You're going to change other lives. And I'm going to take my kids from East Terrace or my coalition kids that are in the Colonial Town Center. I'm going to take them here and I'm going to pay that forward. Okay? So I want to say thank you just for that. All right? Now I want to get on the business portion. There's been talk of how we can save money on this project. And one way that I think that was really immoral in that was not abiding by Davis-Bacon. If we did not pay a living wage, yeah, we could save $1.9 million. But in the Great Depression, and when this country was doing public works projects to put people back to work, they made sure they used skilled artisans and put them to work and did the right thing. And we need to have proper compensation for skilled tradesmen. I have not seen any budget cuts create any prosperity for anyone. And by not paying people a living wage and by not using skilled tradesmen, I have seen the result of some projects that were not built properly, doors that don't close, lights that don't turn on. We don't want to have that in the center, certainly, because we'll certainly get criticized for that if it doesn't get built properly. But the only way to build things properly is not to build them on the cheap, is not to take it out of the pockets of minority communities and people that need the training and jobs that these will provide to possibly change their lives as well. So I think, it's one thing to get $1.6 million in sales tax savings. That's reasonable. And sorry to Representative Thompson, that's not going to the state, but but that's something that we're entitled to, and that's not going to hurt people. But not abiding by Davis-Bacon would have been immoral and would have been unethical for us to do. And I'm glad that this board and the mayor has said we are going to do the right thing. We're going to use skills tradesmen. We're going to use proper wage scales, and we're going to pay people a decent wage. Cutting people and cutting their wages and putting them on the streets and unemploying them is not helping our economy. So I just wanted to say thank you for that, and I'm delighted to be able to support this. I've gone over all the gone over the budget with the staff. I understand it. I think that our financial team has been very careful in their projections and has come up with something that makes sense. And again, I just want to state that this is coming from CRA, Community Redevelopment Agency, and Tourist Development Tax. These are taxes that are paid by people who pay above what the rest of us pay because they want it to go into a special fund. It's basically, you can call it a luxury tax, call it whatever you want, but if they assess they want to pay this special money aside to build things, they should get that. It's no different than residents paying a brick for their brick streets or historic lighting. It's no different than that, and they'd be very upset if they paid extra for that and we took it away. I mean, this is the right thing to do. It's properly done, and all of this talk about how how we should use it for police or fire or downtown, whatever. It just doesn't make sense because that should come from general fund, and people have told us they don't want to pay for that as it is, which is difficult enough to balance budgets. But if people in the tourist community has been very generous and say they want to help us out with this, that's why that 6 cent was enacted. It needs to be used for the proper purposes, and that's what we're going to do here today. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for being able to. I'm delighted to be a part of this, and it's taken a long time for all of us, but it's going to happen. It's very exciting. Can't wait to turn that dirt. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Diamond.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate that, and thank you to everybody for your presentation. Thank you also to the DPAC board for all of your commitment and going above and beyond the call of duty for our community. Let me just ask a few questions now, and I've got a few questions for Byron and for Rebecca, and go ahead and start. Can you talk a little bit, Byron, about the construction schedule that you propose and where that fits in to the overall picture? Because originally I think the plan was to have 2 big theaters and 1 smaller theater. Now the plan is to have one big theater, one smaller theater, and then there's the second theater, and what plan, if any, there is to get to that point, and then in the interim, what will be happening with Bob Carr, and what will stay, what will go to the new facilities, and what stays at Bob Carr?
Sure. The plan for stage one, the construction schedule that's associated with the GMP that you have before you is 34 months plus 3, a total of 37 months. Now, within that, I mentioned earlier there were certain items that were identified for value engineering, or I'm sorry, for deferrals, and there is a document that indicates by what time a decision, i.e. the money, has to be raised in order to or identified in order to add certain items in the deferral. So that's built into that schedule as well in terms of major milestones. As it relates to stage 2, which I think is what you're asking, and how that schedule, that's for stage 2. Stage 2, the plan before you right now is for stage 1, obviously to the extent that dollars are raised that would enable stage 2 to proceed. We have the ability, the way the project is now designed, and we're approaching it, it can exist as a standalone for now, and stage 2 could then proceed without disrupting the stage 1. If dollars were to materialize during the course of the construction, I'll leave that to more construction notable minds than myself in terms of what the approach would be to do stage 2 if dollars were to materialize during that 34 to 35 month period of time. So I'd rather Trey or others who know a little bit more about the actual method of construction of once projects are in process to comment on that if you want more details about or specifics about how that may work.
Do we know how much it would cost to do stage 2?
We know the amount. Probably be more of a process like we've gone through now. We can identify what it would cost to do the acoustical hall, to add back the education building and the other components of it. There's the cost off the top of my head. I don't want to say it's the delta from the start because there is a premium associated with it, obviously. You remember, $110 million? $110 million is the estimate to do stage 2.
And was the original thought that everything would be covered by the original financing plan, and that the staging is to accommodate the reduction of the tourist tax, and then that tourist tax, if and well, hopefully when it comes again, that would be what would be available for stage 2?
There would be half of, well, it'd be, if you use 53 and 10 from 130, whatever that is, 77 plus private philanthropy would make up the rest of that. And actually, Jim, you had it on. Come on, Jim, you want to just speak to that? Because I know you went through that with the board just the other day.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. Phil, the amount of money that's yet to come from the tourist tax, I wrote it out, but I don't have it in front of me, but I can tell you this, that in order to do stage 2 and get all of the tourist tax money and do the endowment of $25 million, DPAC has to raise about $68 million to do that, and that's our commitment to you.
Okay, thank you.
An additional $68 million.
Okay. As far as this plan for phase, well, let me just go back to the stage 2 versus stage 1. Who will be staying at Bob Carr until stage 2 is done? Who will be moving to the new facility after the new facility is done?
More the types of acts that would be best accommodated in the acoustical hall, in the amplified hall and the community theater are the acts. Now, the Bob Carr Performing Arts Center will be under the operation and the direction of DPAC, so they have the opportunity to best coordinate how shows that are in the marketplace or how shows that they are attracting could best fit within the available space. We are fortunate that we'd have two venues. As you recall, when we started these conversations some years ago, one of the challenges we faced is a lack of space. We have shows that may be out there, but only one hall to accommodate them. So now we have the benefit of the additional hall to accommodate them. In terms of the specific shows or operations, I think that would be best handled as those opportunities present itself, and DPAC is in a position to determine which shows fit where based upon the type of shows, the size that they're expecting for the particular show.
Okay. And tell me on the, going back to the financing plan now, and Rebecca, you touched on it as far as if there's if the tourist tax comes in, but it doesn't equal $42 or $43 million, where you go first, where you go second, and what has to be paid back?
I think what I would suggest that we do is that as we get past the distribution for fiscal 2012, which would occur early in 2013, we're going to know pretty well where we're going to end up. And I think at that particular point, we would need to, I would expect to come before the City Council and present alternatives. I think that if we happen to come at that particular date, and let's just say that it's a whole lot better than we ever dreamed, which possibly might happen, then we might be coming to you to set up a bond issue to do stage 2 for this. Alternatively, if it's not quite as good as we expected, then we're going to have to determine whether or not we want to use and appropriate the interlocal bond reserve to make the payments necessary, whatever portion of that might be necessary, and then whatever, another alternative would be to keep the $25 million interlocal bond reserve and issue the debt that we need to finish stage 1. So I think there's going to be a lot of alternatives. It's not something that I would necessarily project today where we're going to be at that particular point. I think if I've learned anything over the last 5.5 years being in Orlando and looking at this tourist development tax, you've got to watch it. You've got to see where it goes. And I think that we'll be able to see that in the next 2 years and then come before you with a lot more information and a lot clearer view of how we should go in the future. So I think it's a decision that you should expect that we would come back to you in late 2012, early 2013 to discuss the going forward position. And I think it could be any of those various alternatives that we might explore at that time.
Okay. So if there's a shortfall, then you don't know whether whether the city would first tap into the $25 million or the line of credit?
Well, I'm sorry. No, in the event that we have a shortfall, the first call on tourist development tax would be to relieve the line of credit. We feel that that's appropriate because those are private individuals who have stepped up to support a public revenue source. And further, their letters of credit are not free. They cost money. It doesn't cost us anything to have a $25 million bond reserve sitting aside. So the first call on tourist development tax as it comes into the city would be to relieve the $16 million of letters of credit. Once we get past $16 million, then we would be into our $25 million interlocal bond reserve amount. And then at that particular point, let's just say for purposes of conversation, we got $15 million, we're $10 million short. I would come and do a presentation. I would envision doing a presentation to you to say we have a choice. We can use $10 million of this $25 million reserve, or we can take the $25 million and issue $10 million worth of debt. Or alternatively, we have $10 million coming in every year now. We have recovered to that particular point. Maybe what we want to do is to get the $10 million to finish this and then move forward with a bond issue for stage 2. But to answer your question directly, the first call on tourist development tax will be to relieve the private individuals who have stepped up to guarantee it. and then our $25 million will be covered.
Okay. And then after the 25 million, then where?
Well, then I think the funding that comes in after that particular point is dedicated to Stage 2, as well as any kind of future project that we do at the Citrus Bowl under the interlocal agreement.
Now, that's the answer.
Is there a priority, I mean, between the Citrus Bowl and the Stage 2?
I think it would be in accordance with the provision in the interlocal. There is a certain amount of combination of debt or funds coming through the interlocal, and I guess the simple answer is the first roughly $10 million is reserved coming through the interlocal for DPAC, and so therefore that first $10 million would be reserved for Stage 2, and then anything above the $10 million would be available for the Citrus Bowl to move forward with that project.
Well, wait a minute, not to make that confusing, the bonding capacity, you're saying if you bond $10 million, which would
Correct.
equal $130 million. So the way the Jacobs Amendment works is that $130 million of TDT-generated money in some fashion has to be payable to the Performing Arts Center before a nickel can go to the Citrus Bowl.
Absolutely. I misspoke. I think that I would estimate to produce the $77 million, I think, remaining tourist development tax supported proceeds for Stage 2, we would need somewhere in the neighborhood of $7 million annually for that particular phase. And then once we have funded that phase, then whatever is above that amount annually could be used to support some kind of a debt issue for the Citrus Bowl.
That was an amendment that was added at the county that we accepted when it came back in August.
Okay. So there is more, but there's a cap on it, and then after that, it's, I guess, up for debate about what happens to it. What now, as far as today, why are you not recommending some sort of bonding instead of the volatility of the tourist development tax? Because I think it's basically a pay-as-you-go sort of arrangement for the next 3 or 4 years, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. The reason why I would not recommend bonding it today is that we have no repayment source. If I were to take a bond issue to New York, payable from tourist development tax coming through the interlocal, I have none. I can show none, so therefore I can't sell that bond issue. It's not really bondable today. Once that gets going again, it'll be a different story, and we can look at ways in which we can put together a bond issue that would be supported by the tourist development tax. Obviously, we would not want to issue, at least I don't believe that we'd want to issue a bond issue for this that would rely on, say, general fund revenues or any other revenue source that we have in the city at this particular point. Largely because we don't have to. We have this other alternative, which I think is a good alternative for us to move through, watching this revenue source rehabilitate itself to the point that then we can go forward with some type of a bond issue and be successful in selling it and making it a reasonable price from the perspective of our cost.
Okay. And as far as the CRA money that's being used to repay the bonds that have been issued, is that from an extra tax, or is that just from the tax increment that, if it weren't for the CRA, would have gone into the general funds of Orange County and the city?
It's a combination. Certain that there is a portion of that is increment that's associated with the Downtown Development Board and is a self-levied millage for that. So a portion of it is associated with that. Some of it is associated with just the downtown CRA's tax increment.
Okay. I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Let's see, got Commissioner Rings and Commissioner Ortiz. Commissioner Rings.
Thank you, Mayor. And I just want to say thank you, Byron Brooks and Trey Nobles and Rebecca Sutton for your presentation today, and also for the big three, Jim Pugh and Mayor Bill Frederick and Chuck Steinmetz. Thank you guys for your vote of confidence in what you've done, and you've stepped up, and you guys have really hit it out the ballpark to show your real support. You've been doing it all along, but this really goes a long way. And thank you, Mayor, too, for your leadership in this effort, and also the chair of the OCCC Alex Martins, thank you too for your leadership. I mean, this is a true community effort. And Kathy Ramsberger, thank you for hanging in there and staying firm, not wavering even when things looked a little dim. But we stayed in there, and we really have hunkered down and found a way to really make this happen. And we have to be really pleased with ourselves. And thank you, Representative Thompson, for your leadership and being involved, too, even from the state level. And for our whole community, this is a great time, great opportunity for us. And I know we can't wait to celebrate it. And the high school students, I can say this for Mayor Dyer, he's going to have lunch for y'all.
Paid out of Commissioner Ng's district funds.
That was a joke. That was a joke. But thank you all for being here, too. And we hope that you've learned something, too, while you were here today and watching all of this dynamics take place. And thank you also to my colleagues, and specifically Commissioner Lynham, too, for her leadership, because this is in her district, and her steadfastness, and especially as it relates with jobs issues and minority and women opportunities in this particular project. It really goes a long way. So, and that's all I have to say, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner Ings, and we'll move to Commissioner Ortiz.
Well, Mayor, by now, most of the questions I had, they have been answered. But I know that no city can prosper to a first-class status without the intellectual component of the arts, for the sake of our kids and our community. And if we weren't to move forward with this project, we'll be depriving ourselves of that. So, with that being said, I want to thank Rebecca, because you always offer a very conservative analysis and projections, and I love that, because I can always, revert to expect the worst in different ways. So thank you for that. Coming from law enforcement, I love the fact that we have a plan A and a plan B. And feeling secure about this, because one serves as an insurance to the other, is something that every citizen of the city, of this great city, has to be proud of. Mr. Jim Pugh, Mayor, and Mr. Steinmetz, your actions serve as a statement of trust and commitment to this community. And we are so proud of you, because as some of my colleagues have said, this is a team effort. I was not here when the first negotiations were about, but I'm so proud of being part of this now. And I think it's the whole fact that the whole community is involved is a test of trust. Everybody's working together. I think there's not a single soul here that doesn't want this to happen. I know in my community, people are waiting for this. And those who don't, they don't know all the facts, and they need to know them. And Rebecca, you've done a great job putting this together, too. I want to also thank those mayors, Mayor Frederick and Mayor Glenda Hood, for their vision, and our mayor for taking the lead on this and bringing it to reality. Commissioner Lynham, for what you've done, too. So that's about what I have to say. I just want to thank everybody. And as I said before, all the questions have been answered. I think we have a solid financial statement of what's going to be happening, and we can rely on that. And the rest of the city of Orlando needs to know it. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Lynham, one more thought.
Somebody's got to speak for the Citrus Bowl, because we voted on venues. And when Rebecca mentioned the Citrus Bowl, I almost jumped out my seat. Because after Dr. Phillips Performing Arts Center, we are going to focus on the Citrus Bowl. So, Byron, can you speak to that? Rebecca's going to talk about those dollars that she kept hinting at. But people in my district want to know about the Citrus Bowl also. It may not be in the next 3 years, but it's coming. And I think part of what we do, and even for the students, is about hope. And that hope is, I'm an optimist. I know the economy is already recovering, but the issue is we will be going to the Citrus Bowl at some point. Can you explain that piece, the formula that once we get into stage 2, when the Citrus Bowl kicks in?
I think much like you saw today, that the commitment to the vision, I don't think any parts of it have waned. And so when the financial circumstances are such, clearly there's a desire to move forward with the Citrus Bowl. Spend the $10 million worth of work that got it into a presentable state, but clearly the desire is still to do the excuse me, the entire plan of renovating the lower bowl to create the environment that also generates and helps us maintain the great bowl games and enjoy the other opportunities for neutral site games and make that a revenue generator as well. Again, the financing at this point, you heard more about it, is obviously inextricably tied to the commitment that's in the interlocal agreement about when dollars could actually be used and dedicated towards the Citrus Bowl, and so we have to simply watch and wait during that period of time. I think you'll continue to see creative thought process and how to make that happen sooner than later. That will never rest, and I know that all discussions, and Mayor Dyer has certainly indicated to the Florida Citrus Sports folks that the Citrus Bowl renovation has not been discarded, and it continues to be part of the community venue's vision.
And Commissioner, we actually took to the design up to a point where in a given year, if we know we are going to be able to put a finance plan back together, we could complete that design within a year or within the timing of what the TDT would be, so that we're sitting in a pretty good position if the TDT comes roaring back to be able to do that fairly quickly. Okay, couple things. One of Commissioner Diamond's questions brought up a point that hasn't been made here today. If we don't start stage 2 before the end of completion of stage 1, and even during the process of stage 1, we will be using, or DPAC will be using, the Methodist Church building that exists on the site for education and administrative purposes. It's a fairly newly renovated building, and we will be taking occupancy, I think, in July of that building. So the plan would be, if we only build stage 1, then they would still have that building to use for administrative and educational purposes. If we move on to stage 2, obviously we're going to have to demolish that building because that's where stage 2 will be sitting. So that's one component that wasn't mentioned. And then I want to go through a few thank yous to, obviously, Jim and the DPAC board. I saw Greg Lee, who chairs the Oversight Committee, and all the members of the Oversight Committee that have been working for 4 or 5 years, making sure that we've stayed on track. Alex and everybody that's associated with the OCCC that bit off more than they realized, I think, but have made sure that we're able to bring this thing in for a landing. And I also want to go back and be mindful of the tourism community that helped lead passage of an extra cent and said we're committed to these downtown venues, because if it wasn't for them stepping up 3 years ago, 4 years ago, and allowing us to put this finance package together, none of us would be sitting here discussing a performing arts center, nor would we have an newly constructed Amway Center that's sitting around the corner. And then finally, Orange County, and both Mayors Crotty and Mayor Jacobs, they remain our partners in this, and we're looking at $43 million of county tourist development tax going into stage 1. So I remain appreciative of their partnership and their continued support for the Performing Arts Center and the other pieces as well. That all being said, we are going to convene at 2 o'clock for a very historic vote that will mean we'll be able to move to a groundbreaking on the Performing Arts Center. So this meeting is adjourned, and I'd love to see everybody back at 2.
arts. You can help keep America beautiful